My name is Dr. Shaleigh, and I'm here with Dr. Joe Clarino, who I've worked with for years, and I'm so excited to have him here to talk on this topic specifically. Actually, before we jump in, Dr. Joe, can you introduce yourself and your journey to functional medicine and just who you are?
Yeah, I'll just spend a few minutes on it because it's a long story. I'll make it as short as I can. About 17 years ago, I hurt my shoulder, wouldn't get better. Couldn't figure out why. Rehabbed it for almost 2 months. Long story short, went and got a stool test, hormone test, adrenal test, thyroid test, and found out that I had parasites and none of my systems were working properly, and I was literally shutting down. So no clue. Was working out 4 times a week and thought I was pretty healthy. In the meantime, I had all this stuff going on inside me, which led me into the understanding and going after and chasing down functional nutrition, aka functional medicine, and going into that world. And here I are 17 years later with tons of data and thousands of cases, and it's been pretty interesting along the way.
Which you actually, if I remember correctly, nobody could figure out what was wrong with you. And it was really the functional medicine team that you...
Yeah, I went to 3 different medical doctors. Felt like something was in my throat. Something punched me in my throat. So I was like, it's got to be a thyroid problem. They gave me 3 medications for GERD, which it wasn't GERD. It was my thyroid. It was enlarged. I did an upper GI series, full-blown GI series. They told me I had a stomach of an 80-year-old. That was their diagnosis. I got a colonoscopy. They told me the same thing, that I have a really slow digestive tract, not understanding why or what was going on in the inflammation that was in the body. But it was all coming from this GI parasitic process that led down the road, which ended up being hormonal, adrenal, and thyroid, which was the end of the track. And that's where it showed up at. And remind you, it took 17 years to show up.
Yeah.
So where it started was I drank some river water when I was in college in West Virginia. And
You're joking about that part, right?
no, I'm dead
Oh
serious.
my gosh, I thought that was a...
No, I actually drank river water without the pills. I don't know whether I don't camp. And
I went to West Virginia University, so I thought that was a stab at me.
No. And then I literally got deadly sick. I didn't poop for 8 days. A Division I football player, and I could not figure. I was a kid. Who cares? I was like, couldn't poop, so I just kept going. Looking back, that's where it started for sure.
Wow, and then it took 17 years to show up.
I sure did.
Yeah, math isn't mathing because you're only 30 now, right?
I'm only 30, so I was very young when it started.
Okay, got it. Well, I'm glad you mentioned hormones because that leads us into what we're talking about today, which is so powerful in the lives that it impacts, which I'm going to get emotional, but this is really close to me. My mom had breast cancer at a really young age. She was 35, 36 when she was diagnosed. She overcame it. She chose to not do chemo. She did radiation, but I always wonder, that really messed up a lot of her health now and in moving forward. And then my husband, my mother-in-law, she has had breast cancer twice and has overcome it both times, but all a while knowing cancer starts in the body 10 years before it even shows up as a symptom. So that is why I am so adamant about women checking their hormones, because although not all breast cancer is estrogen dominant, the majority are. So if we can prevent and catch things early, then we can help prevent it from even becoming a problem later on, or catch it earlier on so you don't have to go through invasive treatment. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is breast cancer specifically, and how testing your hormones through a test that Dr. Joe is going to talk to us about can help prevent and detect early, this test is one that I do personally once a year. I make every female in my family do it once a year.
Very good.
So that we can just be ahead of our hormones. So why this matters, and I know you have some stats that you wanted to share with us, so if you want to jump into those.
Yeah, I could throw some at you. So we have 316,000 or so invasive cases in the U.S. as of 2025. 1 in 8 women develop breast cancer, which is pretty high. It's staggering when you think about that. Rates rising at 1.4 annually, so it's not going down, it's only going up. Even on the heels of all the research we've done, all the money we've raised over the billions and billions of dollars of years, and it's still going up. Small lifestyle shifts, big impacts. So we have talk things like 5 to 20 pounds of weight loss, can decrease your risk anywhere from 18 to 32%. So we know that the exogenous things around us, our environmental things, are affecting not only our genes, but also which is affecting our hormones. So it's going down that realm. So, when you look at these breast cancers, you have estrogen receptors that are sensitive and non-sensitive, or positive or negative, if you want to put it in those terms. And then women that are having these problems are about 70-80% of them have a positive estrogen receptor. So that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, and that's so many women have estrogen-based symptoms, is what we'll call them, and they're just deemed as normal. So, for example, during your periods, having really severe breast pain is an estrogen-dominant problem, and having really severe periods in general is a hormonal imbalance. So whenever we're talking about, okay, there are estrogen positive and estrogen negative breast cancers, yes, you can't roll out all of them by testing your hormones, but the majority you can at least keep tabs on, whether you're metabolizing it, what you were telling me earlier, or not. So ultimately the goal is slower growing estrogen-based breast cancers are the ones that end up showing up later and then sometimes being missed, and they're not caught on mammograms. So whenever we're talking about estrogen and how your body metabolizes it, which I know you're going to get into, before we jump into that, there is a genetic component to breast cancer as well. So obviously if someone has the BRCA gene, they're more likely to develop breast cancer. But again, that's genetic testing is something that we can also do in the office here too. And looking at family history, looking at your demographics, looking at, are you more receptive to or prone to getting an ER positive breast cancer, or are you not? And we should be looking at those estrogens. So that's something that you would determine in functional consultation.
Yeah, and I just want to take a side note on this real quick. Is I think some people, if they get tested and are like, I'm BRCA positive, I'm getting breast cancer, and that is not the truth. And so what happens is that's no different than saying, well, my dad had heart disease, my mom had heart disease, my grandparents had heart disease, I'm going to get heart disease. Are you more likely to get it? Yeah, you are. If you continue to do the same lifestyle, same environmental things that are driving it, and if you put those things into place and it triggers the gene, you're going to have heart disease, you're going to have breast cancer. So it is all about understanding the map. And then when you understand the map, then you understand where you're going. And if you understand where you're going, you don't have to go into the Grand Canyon. You can avoid it. You know what I mean? And that's where I think so many people get lost in healthcare because they're just taking the road that they're told to take. And it leads them right into the Grand Canyon instead of just taking the road around it and then saying, wait a second, I don't have to actually get involved in this and be part of it. Again, it's always about awareness and consciousness and what you're doing. And this is why this kind of testing is so important. It gives you a baseline of understanding exactly what your hormones are doing, what they're not doing, how they're clearing out, how they're not clearing out, where the balance is, where it's not balanced. We're going to get into that in a second. But those are the essential parts of really understanding your hormones. And then we're going to talk about in a second as well some serum to urine and all those things. So I'm really excited to go dive into this.
Awesome. Well, so let's jump into what essentially makes it being positive or not so important. So my generation is our generation in the 30s. Is the first generation to really grow up on birth control, which most birth controls are estrogen dominant or estrogen based. There are some progesterone ones, but the majority are estrogen. So we're really the first generation to have been exposed chronically every day, other than those 3 or 4 sugar pills a month, to estrogen in some form, which also is not prescribed based on body weight or size. It is a given dose.
Yeah, it's just based on symptoms.
It's just based on symptoms.
Right.
So because 1 in 3 breast cancers may result from estrogen-induced DNA damage, that estrogen isn't necessarily great for your body long term. Right. And although, I mean, there's a time and place for birth control in certain situations, you have to take that into account. Have they been on birth control? Have they not been on birth control?
See it all the time.
Which is something I know you go extensive into detail on their examination. So this just helps us understand, okay, have you been exposed to estrogen-based birth control, endocrine disruptors, and all the chemicals that you're using in your products? Even before Dr. Deb always says, before you leave your bathroom, you're exposed to over 17,000 different chemicals, which is crazy. Yeah. I think my husband uses more products than me, but
many of those are hormone disruptors.
Yes.
That's what people don't understand. Like even things like the gel for your hands, they're hormone disruptors. All your makeups are, most of them are disruptors. A lot of your exogenous stuff around your body, like your chemicals in your household, the lawn, all these things, they are disruptors. And once they get in the body, they're now blocking these receptors that we're talking about, and the body can't function the way it used to.
I just called my lawn guy yesterday and I was like, hey, you're doing the lawn, don't forget, don't spray chemicals. Yeah. And he hates me for it because my lawn does not look great, but it's okay.
That's right.
Okay, so let's dive into what I know we've all been waiting for, which is why estrogen metabolism matters. So we'll have pop up on the screen here shortly an example of a test and what it is.
Right. So this is an extremely complicated thing to go over in 5 minutes, really. That's what we're going to go over it. So, I'm going to give you a super high level, but hopefully you can capture some of the ideas I'm talking about through high level. And then, we're going to have a great offer in the end. If you guys are interested in doing something and grabbing the test and learning more about it, we'll have a link below to click. So it's something you can go after. So estrogen metabolites matter because there's several components that happen in your hormones. So let's just go over the basics. You have progesterone, estrogen, something called DHEA, which is a precursor to testosterone. You have some other steroids in between there. And then your testosterone obviously makes your estrogens, right? So there's adrenals involved in there. There's cortisol's involved in there, blood sugar is involved in all these things. So there's a very complicated sandbox, if you will. I always say that everybody's playing in the sandbox. And if one kid's got a shovel hitting each other with the other one, then we have a problem. Mm-hmm. And that's where really disruption comes in. So metabolism matters is because, you know, the more 2OH, which is your protective mechanism. So the thing with the body is you want balance between progesterone and estrogen. That's number one. And what happens in the right cycles of time. And when you don't have that, then you become estrogen dominant. The other side of it is you have these things called 2OH, 4OH, 16OH, and these are protective or non-protective pathways. And what happens is when you're out of ratio on either one of these, mm-hmm. that means you're not removing your estrogens. I think that's the highlight of the whole thing.
So you're not detoxing.
You're not pushing them out. It's called methylation. And that term means that we're taking up all, like, you know, we got a bunch of snowstorm and we're going to like clear out the yard, right? Mm-hmm. So we got to shovel out the snow and get rid of it so that when it does melt, it goes into the right place.
It doesn't turn to ice.
It doesn't turn to ice. And if it does, you have a problem. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly where these ratio-wise are so important. And inside of these reactions are the genetic codes that mm-hmm. trigger this. Mm-hmm. And each of these things environmentally have an effect on how you're clearing or not clearing, and the ratios are right or wrong. And that's why these components of looking at your blood, your urine versus your blood are so different compared to what we normally do.
Okay. Which that's something that we talk about a lot. So I know I've consulted with you on if I have a patient who just symptom-wise telling me that she has a hormonal imbalance or her symptoms are mm-hmm. leading me down that path. And I've talked to you about the Dutch test, and you always want to see ideally blood and hormone together. Sure. Can you talk about the differences in those two?
You know, when I look at blood, it's always a snapshot of where your body is in that side of it, right? So mm-hmm. it's looking at it from a perspective of, like, I would say, like, hey, this is what you're producing. It doesn't mean it's what you've actually utilized and kicked out. Mm-hmm. So in the body, serum is the actual production of what's it. So you could have really great levels, but doesn't mean the body actually utilized it or kicked it out the right way.
Because you don't get a blood draw every single day.
Exactly. And mm-hmm. it's a snapshot in that second. When you're doing something like the Dutch test, we're looking at 4 to 5 different urination points throughout the day. So we're taking a snapshot throughout the day and we're doing it inside of a certain window in a cycle mm-hmm. or predicted cycle that we can understand and go after. The difference between urine and the Dutch test is that it's something called metabolites. And what that basically is, and we have a slide that we'll put up here in a second, it's I like cars, so I use a car analogy, and I like Corvettes. So if you look at an old Corvette versus a new Corvette, and I was to take and look at the exhaust of the car, and this is my loose analogy, so go with it. But if you looked at the old car, you can predict that the car is not efficient. It's not mm-hmm. cleaning out the chemicals right. It's mm-hmm. it's just same gas as both cars, but this one's not cleaning it and metabolizing it the way it needs to. Look at the new car, you're going to see it's a much cleaner exhaust, right? A lot less chemicals coming out, carbon dioxide, oxygen. So you're going to see those different things happening. And essentially, when you're looking at the Dutch test, you're looking at a day. We could even do a 30-day Dutch test, right? We could look at every day. Really cool. It's really cool. And you could look at every single thing that's happening and how are you making it, and then how are you actually utilizing it and kicking it out. When you have that data, it becomes extremely important to understand how your hormones are working or not working, how they're clearing out, how they're not clearing out, how your body's adapting it. Now, that's just the red thread of what we're talking about. That does not include how it affects your thyroid, how it affects your adrenals, how it affects your cortisol levels, which is like all your fat around your waist, your mood, your fatigues, your sex drives, your headaches, your vaginal dryness, your itchiness, all these different things that are come along with having disrupted hormone symptoms. I mean, those are just a handful of symptoms that go along with it. Foggy brain. I mean, I can go on for 5 minutes with symptoms from these things. And women go in and they're looking for an answer, and they go to Dr. A and they're looking at it from this particular lens, not a global lens. When you're doing anything, especially in functional nutrition or functional medicine, is you have to put your arms around all of these problems and then you turn it as one unit. Yeah. Right? When you start turning each one individually, none of them actually really get in sync. They're just turned. You may feel good for a minute, but you're not resolving the whole thing. And I think that's where often a lot of times we go wrong in working. We'll work with one thing and you're not actually dialed it all in at the same time.
Well, you're chasing a symptom.
Yes.
You've used an example for me before where, like, a watch has gears, and if multiple gears are broken and you go in and you fix one gear, it's not going to fix the watch. Yeah. It might start ticking, but if all the gears aren't working together, then it's still ticking slow. And after 2 days, your watch is off.
It's off. Again. You have no time.
So with the 24-hour urine hormone, that's the one that I particularly do every year. Is that something that only women should do, or is that something that men can do as well?
No, it applies to both. I mean, women get more data out of it because they have more complicated hormones. But either way,
we are complex.
Yeah. But either way, I mean, you could look at a man can have testosterone, which is their dominant hormone. But if they're not absorbing it and utilizing it and kicking it out, then the metabolite doesn't matter. Those same things apply to men. If there's things that are blocking it, if your detoxification process isn't there, you're not moving hormones through the body, or you're just blocking overall cellular reception. So just a quick note on this one too is when we talk about receptors, to give you an understanding, think of them like a lock. Every hormone has a lock, every single one, no matter what it is. Insulin, sex hormones, thyroid, they all have locks. And think of the actual hormone as the key. And when the key meets the lock, it undoes it, and then the cell's happy. Whenever that lock is blocked by two different things, particularly, usually toxins or inflammation, that's what drives dysfunction. Then it just cascades down all the way through. If there's a hormonal problem in the body, it's usually at the bottom of the ladder. What I mean by that, it started way up, and then this is the bottom of the rung. So that means there's other things in there that are causing this problem to be there. And often we try to solve it from the bottom up, and it's not how you fix it. You fix it from the top down.
Got it. So I know you had an example of a very estrogen dominant female that you wanted to go over. So I'll go ahead, I'll pull the report up here. And so if you could just talk through this would be, again, I know you would go much more in depth, but just to give us an overview of what essentially the Dutch is looking at.
Yeah, and if you do the test with me, you'll see, we'll go over this in detail, but just for high level, pregnenolone is the top of all mother hormones. Your cholesterol actually makes your pregnenolone. So here's a little side note. Whenever I see women in 210, 220, 230, and I know there are a lot of doctors like, no, your cholesterol's high, I actually argue with that, is because your body's telling you that there's a mechanistic problem down the line, which is trying to increase your cholesterol to produce more hormone. It's actually a defense mechanism, not a bad thing. And we try to lower it, and then we're just hurting more hormones. So cholesterol makes pregnenolone. Pregnenolone makes this thing called DHEA, which you can see here on the left side in the white area. That's also produced by DHA sulfate, which then in turn makes two steroids, which makes testosterone. So on this particular patient, who's a 44-year-old female, heavy menstrual cycles, regular cycle, but heavy. You could look her testosterone levels, her DHEA sulfate's a little low, her testosterone's in the normal range for where she needs to be, and then her two steroids that are precursors to her testosterone are low side. So she's a little low on testosterone from that side of it. But then when you look at on the right side, her progesterone, which makes the two subsets of progesterones, if you could look across the board, she's low, which means in ratio, if you look below that, her estrogens are extremely high. So you have E1, E2, and E3. So if you look below there, you can see. So the main one is your E2. That's your estradiol. That's the main one that's in the body. That's the more protective one. The E1s and E3s are less protective. They're the more damaging ones. So you need a proper ratio between your progesterone and your estrogen. If that's not there, it's number one problem, is that to make sure the ratio is there. But in this particular case, you can see this particular female is highly estrogenic across the board. She's loaded across the board on all three. So then we go down below and I talk about the 2HO, the 4HO, the 16HO, and the ratios. And you can see her 16HO and 4HO are extremely high, which means that those are her non-protective, getting rid of some of the bad estrogens. It can't. So that means she's making high estrogens, bouncing them around, the bad ones, and the body's not clearing them out. That's where cancers can derive from, because it's creating cell proliferation. In other words, estrogens like other cells. They like to grab each other, hold on, and build and build and build and build. And when it has progesterone around it, it slows that process down. It kind of says, hey, you really don't need that one. You don't need that one. You don't need that one. Without it, it just goes and gets whatever it can get. So then when you look below the two red squares, you could see the 2OH. Well, that's a 5.83. From a ratio perspective, the two non-protective clearers are way too high relative to the 2OH, which is protective. So therefore, those are not in sync either. So you have progesterone, estrogens off, your protective, non-protective clearing's off. So this person across the board is extremely estrogenic and very bouncing around her estrogens in her body, and which then when you look to the left of the 2OH, you can see her methylation process. She's got a good range in there, but because of the other ones prior, she's not clearing out the way we need to. So there's an exact protocol that we would go with her to start removing and lowering down her estrogens while we're increasing her progesterones and managing some of these things from dietary, exogenous, environmental, all these different things, as well as potentially doing some hormones or bioidenticals. But typically in these cases, you don't need to. You could usually help the body do its own thing without it. But there are those cases that you need some HRT, and it just depends on the particular patient.
Okay. Hopefully you just got all that and now you're a pro, right? Yeah, easy
Yeah,
enough.
hopefully that was, I didn't try to make it as simple as I can.
Yeah.
The test is much more complicated than that, and it goes way more detail.
Yeah.
But I was just trying to give you an overview of showing you these are the realms in which they're the main hormones that we're looking for. And when they're out of balance, it's very clear and predictable. And then you can rerun these labs and see things actually move and change.
Which I've seen, which is so cool.
It's really wild. Yeah, it's really neat. And then, in essence, you're also moving genetics, because if you're moving that, you're moving genes. Yeah. So it's some really cool work you can do. And so much of it is well within reach of people what they can do. It's just a matter of breaking some of their habits, changing some of their environmental things, and getting the right foods and supplements in their body. And it'll actually flip its script normally.
Which, well, step one is you would never get that information from doing just a normal blood hormone or even a urine hormone at your typical PCP, which is so frustrating for me on not being able to know that information. One thing I wanted to mention when you brought up cholesterol and hormones is typically hormones, when there's too much of it in the body, I didn't learn this until later on, until I was in school, hormones like to store in fat tissue. So a lot of times whenever you have weight gain, when someone's put on birth control, it's because there's excess hormones in your body, and your body, it doesn't know what to do with excess hormones. So a lot of times that's a symptom of someone that might have a hormonal imbalance, is they have abnormal weight gain. And you had mentioned around the belly especially, which I know happens with women when they start to go into perimenopause or menopause, is they start pulling, which that's a whole other webinar for a whole other talk, a whole other time. But I know you wanted to mention some of the symptoms that would drive someone to say, okay, is this test right for me, or is it not?
Well, I mean, I think you mentioned earlier breast tenderness. I mentioned a few of them earlier as well. You get fatigue, brain fog, exhaustion, high exhaustion, especially.
Painful periods, that was a big
Painful
one.
periods, yeah. Stool issues, a lot of diarrhea, non-diarrhea, constipation, on-off, all those kind of things are very indicative of hormone issues. That's why many women get like diarrhea during their
PMS period.
Yeah, because you're actually creating high histamines, which is dumping out, and that's why your body's trying to clear it out, like antihistamine. It's creating high histamines. It's a whole process to that. What else? Obviously low sex drive, vaginal dryness, vaginal itchiness, blood sugar dysregulation. So starving, like the hangries, that can come from hormones.
Headaches as well.
Headaches, migraines, see that all the time. So I'm sure I'm missing a few others, many others, but that's the big ones that I top of my head. And if anybody's suffering with those things and it's been repetitive and your cycles seem to be on off or heavy cycles, or you're not having a cycle anymore, these are the things that you really need to be looking at. Otherwise, you're always looking at it from the top layer and not all the granular pieces, which is where the magic and the juice is. Yeah,
which I know for all the women watching this, we are not taught that your cycle is a vital sign, but it is a vital sign. If your cycle is abnormal, or you're not getting it every month, or you're just like, oh no, I'm just a heavy bleeder and I bleed for 8 to 10 days, that is abnormal. So look at your cycle, and that is, I think, one of the first indicators.
I know more about cycles than most women do.
That's true.
There was a couple times I thought I actually had a period, but I didn't.
If one shows up, then
that's what I was like, wow, I'm so connected to this. This is like, wow, it's pretty weird. But
to be honest, if you get a period, I'm going to take credit for it because I know my hormones mess up everyone in this office. All right. Well, I know I don't want to take too much of your time, and you've given us so much information, but I know you wanted to offer something really special.
Yes, if you click the link below, one of the things I want to do for people is, because you can order the test. A lot of places will sell this test, but if you want to purchase it, we have it on sale. And as well as I will do a free in-person interpretation for you. So, which is insane.
I just don't understand the value of that. Yeah. This test you just saw a glimpse of it. It is so overwhelming, but so powerful in all the information, and is such a great tool to be able to utilize and to get your 16, 17, I don't even know, years of experience in interpreting it. That is invaluable.
Yeah, and our goal here is to make awareness around this. That's what the whole month's about, is breast cancer awareness. And I just think so many women are finding the information from an outside source, and I would love to get it to a granular source, and then just teach people what it is about their bodies and how to maneuver through this thing called life and actually be healthier. So that's why we're making that offer. So if you're really interested in doing something, just click the link below. We'd love to have you and see you, and then it'll lead you down the whole path. So
awesome. And we can do those consults virtual or in person, right?
Yeah, we could do both.
Okay. Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. Hopefully you stuck around so you could find out about that amazing offer that literally has never been done. So click the link, let us know if you have any questions, and please like, share, and comment so we can spread the word and make sure everybody stays healthy as long as possible.
Thanks, Dr. Shaleigh. Appreciate it.